How many different kinds of edits are there? How many editors do I really need to hire for my manuscript? What am I really going to get for the money I'm paying for these services? Is there a better and more efficient and cost-effective way to handle all of this? If you've ever asked yourself any of those questions, chances are you're an author with a finished or nearly finished manuscript, and you're staring down the business end of the editing train. Before we get to the types of edits, their considerations and limitations, and the relative costs of each stage of the editing pathway, it's important to understand why readers give up on books and what kinds of edits help keep readers engaged. Last spring, Pandemonium Publishing shared an article detailing some common issues in books that cause readers to quit reading. The top 6 issues are slow starts, unlikable characters, predictable plots, poor pacing, lack of conflict, overly complex writing. Notice that the first 5 issues causing readers to put down books are developmental in nature. The 6th issue comes down to your use of language to convey your ideas and is likely a delivery issue. Typos in a published book didn't even get mentioned. I'm saying this early in this video because inevitably, when I make certain budget maximization suggestions, someone always points to stray typos as a serious mark of embarrassment for the author. Honestly, though, I'd rather have a reader find an errant remeber left in my story than tell me they couldn't get into it. Most readers are with me, preferring a well-wrought story with a few typos over a meticulously copy-edited story with little character, setting, or plot development. Still, there are some general things to keep in mind when deciding on your approach to editing. The 3 major parts of any professional service are speed, quality, and cost. Speed is the rate at which your editor works through your manuscript until the document or other deliverable is back in your hands. Quality is the level of attention to detail your editor provides as they work through your manuscript, looking at the fine points and giving feedback. Cost is the total sum agreed upon between you and your editor for the desired editorial service and is often dependent on both speed and quality. Generally speaking, 2 of these 3 parts will be more important to you than the other, and you'll need to choose which parts take precedence. If you're willing to pay a little more for your edit, you may receive a faster turnaround time that retains quality. If you're willing to wait a little longer to get your edit back, you may receive a lower price for the quality work your editor provides. If you're willing to do some of the grit work yourself and sacrifice a little quality, you may save on both cost and speed. Get clear on which 2 parts are most important to you before any editor outreach begins. You'll save yourself and your future editor lots of time and mental strain. Now, I'm going to break down the 7 most common professional editorial services chronologically by state of manuscript doneness. Let's dive in. A story development review is one of the earliest services available because it helps you understand and flesh out your story. Your editor will review your outline or your summary with an eye attuned to narrative delivery. Is there enough here to make a compelling story? Your editor looks at potential plot and character issues, provides considerations to carry into your writing, and gives suggestions early to make sure your story is rooted in place and time. The relative cost is pretty low. And we do this type of editorial work before you really begin writing. Story discovery is what happens after you've finished your first draft or are very close to finishing. Your draft probably includes lots of snags and snafus, explores possible directions in which your story could go, whether or not it does, and focuses on settings as enhancements for both plot and character. Your editor will help you make sense of the ideas bouncing around your noodler and help you either expand those ideas or tighten them, depending on the needs of your story and the goals for your discovery edit. You'll have help finding the true heart of your story. The relative cost is low to medium. And you do this type of editorial work when you have a finished or mostly finished first draft. When your novel is finished and you've completed at least one thorough self-edit, you may be ready for a story assessment, which is also called a manuscript critique, a manuscript assessment, or a readability assessment, which looks at the big picture of your story. You're not ready for red line text and in-document comments, but you are ready for some professional feedback and a solid direction for your revisions. Your editor will help you understand the strengths of your story and know where your story can be improved through reader-focused questions and commentary designed for your narrative and your narrative delivery. The relative cost? Medium. You do this type of work when you've finished your first draft and need direction for revisions, whether or not you've had an alpha reading. A quick note: if you are tenacious, you may use an assessment as a replacement to a more formal and more costly developmental edit. However, you must backfill the feedback you'd otherwise miss out on when working with a more formal and seasoned developmental editor. Like a story or manuscript assessment, developmental edits focus on the big picture of your story. However, developmental edits provide an intense and scrutinizing view of the depths of your story, where an assessment merely touches the glassy surface. Your editor will provide feedback like a breadcrumb trail from beginning to end, helping you retain control of your revision even as big things are moving and changing. And depending on the editor's style and your preferences, developmental edits may unfold in 3 different ways. First, there's the standard developmental edit, which you're probably familiar with. In-document comments and red line text through track changes, plus a short editorial memo explaining what's inside the edit. Your editor provides feedback, but you ultimately make the changes yourself, using the in-document suggestions for guidance along the way. A hands-off developmental edit is a custom-written story report, really a microbook written about your story, which I call a revision roadmap, explaining everything you'd otherwise get from a standard developmental edit, but without the red line text or in-document comments. Your editor provides the feedback, and you ultimately make the changes yourself using the microbook as a map to guide you. Developmental ghosting is also called book doctoring, and it happens where your editor acts as a spare pair of hands to implement big picture revisions on your behalf based on an agreed upon revision plan. You and your editor decide on the changes together, and your editor ultimately makes the changes for you using your mutual decisions as guidance. The relative cost for a developmental edit is medium to high, and you do this after your draft has been heavily self-edited and you've had an alpha reading. As a quick note, developmental ghosting or book doctoring is the highest priced type of developmental edit because your editor is doing much more manual work within your manuscript than would be required with different methods. The upside of this added cost is that through the developmental ghosting, you may, not always, but may be able to bypass substantive or line editing. You know, for a group of professionals heavily focused on consistency, editors sure do have a plethora of ways to describe the same services, don't we? Whether you call them substantive edits, line edits, or language edits, this particular editorial service is a sentence-by-sentence analysis of your manuscript from front to back, which addresses fine language details, including voice development of both your narrator and your characters. Your editor helps you smooth cadence and pace, corrects some grammar and punctuation, and punches up your intentional creative rule breaking to enhance descriptions, dialogue, and more. And all suggested changes are provided as redline text in your manuscript. The relative cost here is medium to high. And you do this type of edit when your draft has been heavily self-edited and you've had a beta reading. Copy edits are a sentence-by-sentence analysis of your manuscript from front to back, which looks primarily at the 4 C's: correctness of grammar and punctuation, clarity of intent and meaning, consistency of traits and ideas, and conciseness of information delivery. Your copy editor will comb through your manuscript, fact-checking as they work while reviewing your story through your future reader's eyes, enhancing your language without upsetting your voice or message, using the Chicago Manual of Style as a guide. The relative cost of a copy edit is low to medium. And you do this type of work when you've implemented previous editorial and early reader feedback and have thoroughly self-edited your manuscript. Proofreading should be the very last help you need just before you hit publish, and is best done on a fully formatted manuscript in PDF, which prevents wild formatting problems from creeping into your manuscript when there's little time left to address them. Your editor will point out only true errors. Remember from before? And will not suggest changes for readability, enhancement, or development. The relative cost of proofreading is low to medium. And you do this type of editorial work when your novel has been formatted and is ready to publish, and you're doing final checks to make sure everything is copacetic before printing. In a perfect world, every author would have the maximum budget available to get help via all 7 editorial services, working closely with a team of dedicated editors from concept to finished book. However, budgets and time are limited. Publishing seems to move at lightning speed, and if we agonize over every little detail, we may agonize ourselves out of publishing altogether. So, I prefer budget maximization with a side order of revision stress management. In this case, less is more. Every editor you ask may give you a different answer here. But given that readers mostly put down books for developmental reasons, I typically suggest investing in some developmental help, which varies, as well as some kind of language help to make sure the story in your head is the one the reader will get on paper. For this reason, developmental edits and copy edits are often paired, as are story assessments and line edits. Both of these pairings give you some developmental help and some language help without unleashing a clown car of editors all over your manuscript. Choosing the editorial help most relevant to you shouldn't leave you feeling like a stress chicken, spiritually or financially. Look at your options. Chat with a few editors to understand how they work and what they offer, and decide only when you know your budget and how far it'll go to get you what you want. Still not sure? Let me know in the comments whether you've had early readers or some help on your manuscript so far. How many people other than your family members have read your manuscript, what you want to get out of the editing process, and your relative budget. I'll do my best to make a suggestion that fits your needs and budget. Happy writing.